Hey everyone, today I'm super excited to share some awesome Unrailed teamwork tips that I wish someone had told me when I first started playing the game. I will only focus on the team play aspect of the game, because it's fundamental for reaching higher speeds and long distances. The video is structured as follows. I'll start by providing a broad overview about the existing roles, and then going into the details by providing a list of priorities of each role. At the end of each section, there will be additional tips on how to play more efficiently. In a team of 4, each player usually takes a specific role. There are the cutters, one for wood and one for iron, whose job is to clear the path to the station and gather the sufficient amount of resources. The loader, who takes loose resources and refills all the wagons, especially the storage. And lastly, a track placer, who controls where the train goes, and makes sure it never runs out of tracks. Players stay in their specific role, as long as not communicated otherwise. If you have a team of less than 4 players, make sure to stick around until the end of the video. I'll explain how responsibilities change when there are fewer people involved. The first role we will look at are the cutters. As a cutter, here's a list of priorities you need to focus on. First and foremost, ensure a steady supply of resources. As long as there are resources of both types available, your team can continue building and placing new tracks. Running out of a resource and causing a crash is a common issue for new players, so let's avoid that situation. Your second priority is to carefully choose and clear the path to the next station. But what makes a good path, you ask? Well, a good path has a balanced mix of both resources. Sometimes it might mean taking a slightly longer route, but it's definitely worth it. This way, you prevent running dry on any particular resource, and it keeps the distance shorter for the loader, which becomes crucial as the train speeds up. When mining, start by creating a single wide path towards the next resource, allowing the other cutter to mine ahead. Then, return to the starting point and cut the second row to open up access. The initial path you create should align with where the tracks will be placed. I'll explain what makes for a good track placement a bit later in the video. The third task of the cutters is to ensure access to water so that the bucket can be filled before the train catches fire. It's crucial to keep that in mind. Now, let's move on to the fourth task, placing bridges. It's important to bridge only where it's necessary. Just because there's some water left doesn't mean your team will benefit from an additional bridge. In fact, it can be the opposite, because having too many bridges can deplete your wood supply. So, if you're running low on wood, it's better to go around the water instead of building unnecessary bridges. Next up is task number 5, getting the bolt. This is actually the lowest priority, because if the previous tasks aren't properly fulfilled, you risk crashing the train, especially at higher speeds. Don't worry too much about leaving a bolt behind. If your team follows these tips, you'll have plenty of opportunities to gather bolts just by reaching the stations and staying in one biome for an extended period. However, do make sure to grab the orange special bolt, as it's necessary to win the game. But please, never jeopardize the train's safety or waste a significant amount of wood just to get a single bolt. Most of the time, it's just not worth it. Finally, I collected some general tips for cutters. Keep your tools at the front. When you need to pick up something like a dynamite, it's best to leave your tools at the front. This way, you'll avoid making extra trips back and forth. It's especially important to remember this when playing with a milk wagon, because accidentally hitting a cow while dashing into the milk wagon might kill the cow. Now, if you're playing with dynamite, I have a few more tips for you. First and foremost, use it efficiently. While one cutter is fetching the dynamite, the other can start making a hole. For normal dynamite, the holes should be around 3 to 4 tiles deep, and for yellow dynamite, up to 5 tiles deep. If the path is already deeper, don't place the dynamite at the very end. Instead, count 4 tiles from the left edge or 5 for the yellow dynamite. When selecting a spot to place the dynamite, take a look at the resources on the ground. If there's a shortage of a particular resource, prioritize blowing up some of that scarce resource instead of clearing the path to the station. This way, you'll ensure that you have enough tracks to reach the station without running out due to limited resources. When picking up the dynamite, make sure to announce it multiple times to your team so that they won't accidentally dash into you. Colliding with a person holding dynamite will result in dropping the dynamite and triggering the countdown, which usually wastes the dynamite and could kill your team members. Lastly, if someone is waiting with the dynamite while you're cutting the hole, take your time to complete the hole and then walk out of it. Avoid dashing to prevent wasting the dynamite. Those were some of the most important tips I gathered for the cutters. Now, let's shift our focus to the loader, also known as the supplier. If you find yourself in the role of a loader, here are the tasks you need to take care of. First and foremost, your main responsibility is to refill all the wagons and the water. The water can be refilled at the water tank as well as the engine. It's important for you to keep an eye out for any resource scarcities and try to save as much of the scarce resource as possible before it runs out completely. The second priority is to make sure that the bucket doesn't get left behind at the left edge of the screen. It's easy to overlook, so always double check and ensure it's brought along with the team. During slower train speeds, you might find yourself with some downtime. In those moments, you can support the cutters by bringing them the dynamite. If you need a refresher on how to deal with dynamite efficiently, you can jump back in the video to the cutters section where I explained the details. In case you're playing with the milk wagon, pay attention to reattaching any animals that may have gotten lost. Especially towards the end of the station, animals can quickly become disconnected when the tracks are completed while the train isn't close to the station. Loading is a simple job at 0.250 speed but becomes tricky when the train goes fast. So here are a few tips how to catch up with the train. The loader usually takes resources from the left side of the train, to not get in the way of the track placer. The track player supports the loader, by bringing resources from the right on his trip back to the train. You can shorten the overall walking distance by first moving resources on the vertical axis closer to tracks and fill them in, when the train is closer. If you play hard or extreme difficulty, your team will encounter pinches from time to time. A pinch is a narrow gap between Blackrock where either the train or a player can pass. As a loader, you might be needed to stay behind the train and load resources until the last moment possible. After you can't reach the desired wagons anymore, you can get to the new site quickly by respawning. To do this, go to the escape menu and select respawn. You will either respawn on a tool laying on the ground, or if that's not an option or they are too far away, you will respawn on the engine. Something you'll notice quite often in public games is an inefficient pattern where the loader takes tracks and places them randomly, thinking it will save the track placer from running too far. While this is done with good intentions, it usually ends up causing more confusion for the track placer, especially when the game speed increases. Besides adding confusion, the problem with leaving stacks of tracks on the ground is that you have to manually move them forward yourself. However, if you leave the tracks on the train, it will automatically carry them for you. Now, let's focus on the track placer. Their main role is to connect new tracks to the railway while trying to avoid cutoffs. If you happen to be the track placer, here are the tasks you need to take care of. First and foremost, ensure that there are always connected tracks ahead of the engine. This keeps the train moving smoothly. A good track placement follows certain criteria. It aims to prevent players from getting blocked or cut off by the train whenever possible. In other words, a good track placement ensures that players don't have to cross the tracks, as crossing them can lead to problems when the train reaches that point. A simple but effective strategy is to always place tracks hugging the top and leaving one or more free rows below for players to walk. You might wonder why we hug the top and not the bottom. Well, there are a couple of reasons. First, if players have to walk above the train, their view of the resources on the ground gets obscured by the train itself. Second, when we reach the next station, we will respawn below the tracks again. If we were to play above the tracks, we would be forced to cross them at least once per station. So, it's more convenient to stay below. Lastly, you'll want to ensure that you have access to all wagons at the next station. If your track comes from the bottom, the last wagons might become inaccessible, causing unnecessary difficulties. That's why we hug the top and not the bottom. However, I have one more example where we needed to consider wagon accessibility for the next round. In this case, it's better to reroute the train from below to ensure access to all wagons in the next level. With the most important aspects of a good track placement explained, we can now continue with the second priority of the track placer, which is supporting the loader. Take a look at the type of resource your loader has access to and bring the other resource back to the train on your way. Sometimes, it's easier to simply drop the resource nearby instead of filling it into the storage wagon yourself. This helps avoid collisions and running into each other during the process. If your loader runs off with the dynamite, take a moment to refill the dynamite. Trust me, it's definitely worth it. Having an instant reload means you can use more dynamite, which leads to gathering more resources. And with more resources, you can craft more tracks, allowing for better looping and survival at higher speeds. So always make it a priority to quickly refill the dynamite whenever it's needed. Here are some additional tips for track placers. Firstly, you can tear down up to 3 connected tracks at once by holding down your pickup button and walking towards the tracks. It's important to practice this technique without pressure so that you can quickly reroute when needed. If the path to the next station is unclear, leave a round next to the black rock free. This allows you to backtrack in case you realize you chose the wrong direction. Another option is to introduce loops in the tracks, which gives the cutters more time to explore the map and clear the path. As a track placer, you have the responsibility to control the pace of the game. You can reduce pressure on the cutters by either adding loops or connecting fewer tracks. Keep in mind that the speed of the engine increases based on the number of connected tracks ahead. So, being patient as a track placer is crucial. Also, remember to increase the distance between the train and the cutters as the engine speed picks up. While you can place tracks under the cutter's feet during the first few stations, avoid doing this when the train gains speed. When your team encounters a pinch, you have to pay special attention. It's crucial to delay the train until the necessary preparations are completed. This entails ensuring that all required tools, such as the bucket and perhaps a stack of tracks, are readily available on the new side. Additionally, you should wait until sufficient amount of resources are mined to create maneuvering space. So remember, take your time, prepare adequately, and clear the way before proceeding through a pinch in Unrailed. It's crucial to keep in mind that there can only be one track placer at any given time in Unrailed. This is because tracks are placed randomly as soon as multiple players attempt to lay tracks simultaneously. If you don't have a team of 4 people, the roles can be shared among the players. In a team of 3, you typically have one track placer who loads resources for themselves. Then there's one player who is a full-time cutter, and another person who takes on the role of 80% cutter and 20% loader. In practice, this usually plays out as follows. At the beginning of the map, the switcher helps with cutting. As the game progresses and you reach the middle of the map, the track placer may have depleted their resources and could use some assistance. At this point, the switcher helps filling up the storage and returns to cutting afterwards. Towards the end, they help again by crafting tracks for the next station. If you're playing with just 2 people, you'll have one person as the cutter and the other as the track placer, who also takes on the responsibilities of the loader. One very last tip. If you're having trouble convincing your buddies to join you in playing Unrailed, I suggest checking out the official Unrailed Discord server. There, you can connect with fellow players, engage in conversations, and discuss the game. Personally, I found the most effective way to find other players is to hop into an ongoing conversation or, if none are available, join an empty channel and livestream my gameplay. While waiting for players to join, I usually play alongside the bot. Another option is to inquire in the crew finding channel, but from my experience, livestreaming the game tends to attract players more quickly. That wraps up all I wanted to cover in this tutorial. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it with your friends. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in more tutorials like this and what topics seem most important to you.